Hit that subscribe button if you dare, because tonight's story will make you question how well you really know your neighbors. It began in the small, windswept town of Plainfield, Wisconsin, a place where everyone knew everyone, and life moved at the steady pace of the seasons. In the 1950s, the town had fewer than 700 residents. There were 2 churches, 1 gas station, and a diner that served the same coffee to the same people every morning. It was the kind of town where you didn't need to lock your doors, until Richard Gein changed that forever. To most, Richard was just another quiet man who lived on the edge of town. He kept to himself, maintained his family's farm after his parents passed away, and rarely caused trouble. Locals described him as shy, polite, even kind, a man who could fix your fence, lend you a tool, and ask for nothing in return. He wasn't much for conversation, but when he did talk, his words came slow and measured, like someone who'd spent too much time alone. But there was something about him, something that didn't quite fit. He never seemed comfortable around people. He would laugh at the wrong moments, stare too long, and sometimes drift off in the middle of a sentence, as if lost in a thought no one else could follow. Children whispered stories about the Gein farm, the way lights flickered in the windows late at night, the strange smells that drifted through the fields, the old pickup truck that came and went at odd hours. But in a town like Plainfield, where gossip was as common as snowfall, most brushed it off as small-town talk. Then, one cold November morning, everything changed. It was the start of hunting season, and the streets were quieter than usual. Bernice Wardens, owner of the local hardware store, was supposed to open shop early. When she didn't, her son Frank grew concerned. He drove to the store and found the front door unlocked. Inside, the register drawer was pulled out. A faint streak of blood led toward the back door, disappearing into the snow. On the counter sat a receipt for antifreeze, handwritten, time-stamped that very morning. The buyer's name, Richard Gein. Sheriff's deputies were dispatched to question him, but when they reached the Gein property, the farmhouse sat silent under a gray sky. The wind rattled loose shutters. A rusted tractor leaned in the field like a forgotten relic. There was no sign of movement, no barking dogs, no smoke from the chimney. Officers knocked. No answer. They circled the house, called his name. Nothing. As night fell, they forced the door open. The air inside was stale, cold, and heavy with a smell none of them could place. Flashlights flickered over stacks of newspapers, books, and broken furniture. Every surface was cluttered. The walls seemed to close in as they moved deeper into the house. Then one of the deputies called out from the back room, and in that instant, the small town of Plainfield changed forever. The farmhouse, once the picture of isolation, was revealed to be a labyrinth of horrors. It wasn't just a home, it was a collection of secrets that no one in town could have imagined. Every officer who stepped inside that night would leave changed, haunted by the things they'd seen and the realization that the quiet man everyone thought they knew had been living a double life beyond comprehension. By dawn, word had spread. Police cars lined the frozen dirt road leading to the Gein farm. Reporters from Madison and Milwaukee began arriving, chasing rumors that sounded too horrific to be true. Plainfield, once known for its stillness, was suddenly the center of the nation's most shocking investigation. But before the world knew the details, before the headlines screamed his name, before Plainfield became synonymous with fear, there was one question whispered among the townsfolk standing behind police tape that morning. How long had Richard been hiding in plain sight? The sheriff later said he could still feel the cold of that farmhouse years after. It wasn't just what we found, he said. It was the feeling that we'd walked into the mind of someone who'd stopped being human a long time ago. As the investigation unfolded, the full picture of Richard Gein's life, and the disturbing obsession that consumed him, would begin to emerge. But for the people of Plainfield, one truth became clear that night: evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it lives quietly, just beyond the tree line. And when they finally uncovered what was inside that house, it wasn't just a crime scene, it was a reflection of madness itself. The sun rose weakly over Plainfield, casting pale light across the frost-covered fields. What should have been a quiet Sunday morning had turned into a nightmare of flashing police lights, news vans, and stunned neighbors whispering in disbelief. The Gein farmhouse, long considered just another relic of a forgotten life, was now surrounded by investigators in heavy coats and photographers documenting every inch of the property. Inside, the silence was suffocating. The farmhouse felt less like a home and more like a tomb. Each step creaked beneath the weight of dust and decay. The air was cold and carried the scent of earth, oil, and something else, something wrong. The kitchen table was set for one, as if waiting for a meal that would never come. Newspapers dating back years were stacked in columns against the walls. And pinned between them, investigators found notes, scrawled in uneven handwriting, fragments of thoughts, half legible and deeply unsettling. The deeper they searched, the stranger it became. Cabinets were filled with books on anatomy, folklore, and medieval medicine. Drawers held old photographs, most yellowed with age, and several marked with strange annotations. One officer opened a locked chest and froze. Inside were small objects meticulously arranged and labeled, evidence of a mind driven by obsession, not chaos. Everything had a purpose, a pattern. Outside, neighbors gathered behind the police line, watching with wide eyes as detectives came and went. Reporters from Milwaukee were already on scene, scribbling in notepads, muttering words like unthinkable and unholy. But no one could have predicted the full scope of what was inside that farmhouse. By noon, Sheriff Artley called in additional units. The property was too vast, the findings too complex. Detectives began combing through the barn, the workshop, even the abandoned vehicles in the field. Every discovery only deepened the mystery. Where had Richard been getting the materials for his strange experiments? Why had no one noticed the deliveries that came in the dead of night? At the station, files began piling up. Witnesses were interviewed, including those who'd known Richard for years. Some recalled strange requests, trips to the local graveyard, odd purchases at hardware stores, and long, solitary drives to neighboring towns. Others remembered how he'd spoken lovingly of his late mother, Augusta, as if she were still alive. In those moments, his quiet demeanor would shift, his eyes unfocused, his voice dropping into a near whisper. Investigators started piecing together a pattern. The timeline of disappearances, the strange rumors about grave robbing, the whispers of missing persons from nearby counties. But it wasn't until they recovered a hidden ledger from beneath the floorboards that they realized how deep it went. The ledger contained names, dates, and cryptic notes written in Richard's unmistakable hand. Some of the names were familiar, women who had vanished years earlier. Others were unknown, perhaps people no one had ever reported missing. Each entry seemed to correspond to something, a night, an object, or a phrase like, restored, or made whole. Forensic teams worked through the night, hauling evidence out of the farmhouse piece by piece. One detective later described the experience as like walking through someone's nightmares. And yet, for all they found, one thing remained missing: Richard himself. He wasn't at the house. His truck was gone. And no one in town had seen him since the morning Bernice Wardens disappeared. The entire county went on alert. Roadblocks were set up on every highway leading out of Plainfield. The state police joined the search, and word spread to surrounding towns. That night, a snowstorm rolled in. The fields turned white again, erasing tracks and clues. Officers pushed through the cold, searching the woods and back roads, their flashlights cutting thin beams through the darkness. It was just after midnight when a deputy spotted the old Ford pickup parked outside a deserted grocery store on the outskirts of town. The truck was empty, but footprints in the snow led to the back door of the store. The deputy called for backup. Moments later, flashlights illuminated a narrow hallway, and there he was. Richard Gein stood quietly in the corner, his hands raised, his face expressionless. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. He simply nodded when they called his name, as if he'd been expecting them all along. When they asked him where Bernice Wardens was, he looked at the sheriff and said softly, "She's at the house." Those 5 words sent a chill through every man in that room. By morning, Richard was in custody. News of his arrest spread like wildfire. The nation's newspapers carried the story, painting him as the madman of Plainfield. But behind the headlines and the horror, investigators were just beginning to uncover the real question, not what he had done, but why. What had driven a quiet, polite man to the edge of madness? What had he been searching for in that lonely farmhouse? As dawn broke over Plainfield once again, the sheriff stood outside the Gein property, staring at the dark outline of the house against the snow. "You can feel it," he murmured. "The evil didn't just live there, it grew there." The farmhouse was sealed off, its doors locked, its windows boarded. But even with Richard Gein behind bars, the sense of unease lingered. The people of Plainfield would never look at that stretch of road the same way again. And in the days to come, as investigators uncovered the rest of what was hidden in that house, they would realize that the story of Richard Gein was far from over.